Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. It is a sunny Thursday in Portland, Oregon as we record this. I'm Bill Oram, joined as always by Brenna Green from Coin6. Hello, Brenna.
Should we just start this podcast with a mea culpa from me?
Brenna, here's the deal. Last week, I came in with all these notes and all these things I wanted to say about the Oregon State Gonzaga basketball game because I thought it was an intriguing matchup. You, a Gonzaga alum, rolled your eyes at me and said, I am not interested in this game. I have whatever you want to say is fine. That should tell you just how seriously I, as a Gonzaga alum, am taking this game. Right then and there, I knew that the Zags were toast at Gill Coliseum.
The Zags agreed with me.
I knew in that exact moment that Oregon State was in for a big night. The Beavers managed to pull off a heck of a win. It's been a week now, so we're a little bit past it, but a heck of a win at Gill Coliseum over the Zags.
And then Gonzaga went on to drop their next game too.
As did the Beavers, and I will say there's something to be said for, what a turnaround from that game on Thursday night for both those teams. 8 p.m. tip in Corvallis. They turn around.
Mark Few was not happy about that 8 p.m. tip, by the way.
The Zags have to go home and play a really good Santa Clara team at the Pit. Mm-hmm. They lose that game. And then the Beavers had to get on a plane and fly down to the Bay and play the University of San Francisco on the road in less than 48 hours, which is also another good. I mean, there's a lot of good teams at WCC. The Dons are good. So the Beavers lose that game. And neither of those are terribly objectionable to me, but it was a bit of a letdown for the Beavers to not be able to sort of maintain their momentum after one of the biggest wins they've had. Truly one of the biggest wins they've had in Wayne Tinkle's tenure. And I say that recognizing there have been multiple NCAA tournament appearances. There's been an Elite Eight run. Last year, there was the win against Arizona. Mm-hmm. But one thing that, was said on the broadcast of that game, and I've thought about a lot too, is it just was so meaningful for Oregon State to get a win over a ranked opponent when it really wasn't. It wasn't a fluke in the sense it wasn't like they played out of their minds one night and made a heroic shot.
They did have a backboard 3 in overtime.
Yeah, but they also led. But also Gonzaga needed a 3 from Ike to get to overtime. And so it was and there was a travel on Ryan Nembhard. So it was.
I guess Ike traveled when he had that 3. But
Nembhard in the paint travels and throws it out to Ike. If Ike traveled too, fine. But there was definitely a travel. And then my point is that Oregon State played the way they've played all year. They went head to head with a really quality opponent in this new conference. The question with any team in the WCC is how are you going to be able to handle Gonzaga? First time the Zags had come to Corvallis in 34 years. I'm not saying that if the Zags and Beavers play, 100 times that it would be 50 wins for the Beavers. It probably wouldn't be. But to my point about it, I feel like there was a lot of substance to that win. Whereas the Beavers played out of their mind one night and beat Arizona on a crazy buzzer beater by Jordan Pope last year. That doesn't to me necessarily connote progress in the program. This game to me connoted progress and that there's something happening in Wayne Tinkle's program where he is bringing in players that he can actually build with and grow with. And it's of course going to be the same question of can you keep them in Corvallis? Is the NIL going to work? And I do know that there's a hope that they have. I mean, obviously there's always hope, but they went to the international player model, and the hope is international players grow up in a club system where players do spend more years in one place. Can that potentially carry over to OSU? So I don't know, but I think that from what you've seen over the last couple of years with Oregon State, really meaningful growth from last year to this year, especially when you consider the talent that the Beavers lost in the portal last year. So Brenna, obviously the personal allegiances for you were a struggle over the weekend when it came to the Zags, but I'm wondering if you were to be able to put those aside, did you have any Beaver-centric takeaways from that game?
Okay, so I will fully admit that I was sidelining a UP game that night.
Yep.
So I did not get to watch it until about really, I think I really didn't get to sit down and watch that game until it was in overtime. So, so there is that. So I'm not going to claim that I really, watched it like crazy. Obviously I had some friends text me and they were saying that Oregon State was making insane shots. But I don't know. So I can only reference what I saw there. Yeah, I mean, I think just generally watching how things went. I did watch had the San Francisco game on kind of passively at the office. And yeah, just like having that let down was unfortunate to kind of watch. Especially since God, I think San Francisco had 18 threes in that game. And, that's just like, it's just disappointing to be like, okay, you guys just beat Gonzaga and then you gave up 18 threes.
Here's what I'll say about the Beavers in that game and like the idea of insane shots. Like they had players definitely get hot.
Yeah.
And Nate Kings, I think, had 17 points in the first half and finished with 19. But what the Beavers have this year that I think that they've lacked over the last couple of years is real balance in terms of who can beat you. Parsifala can destroy most opposing big men in the post. You know what he's going to do.
Great games recently,
and you know what he's going to do. But like he is a go-to scorer. Michael Ratai, go-to scorer, obviously. DeMarco Minor, absolutely took over in portions of that game. Nate Kings, obviously can get buckets. And then it's just a team that can beat you a lot of different ways. And I think you saw that. And you need to be able to play like that to beat Gonzaga. Like this is like that. And over 45 minutes, the Beavers didn't go on one big run to steal the win. They did have to come back in the final few minutes in regulation, but they were running away with the game before those 2 threes by Ben Gregg and by Ike. And they led at halftime. I just thought it was a really complete, incredible win. And obviously the Beavers have had road woes that Oregon State fans know all too well and like to point out when they're talking about, Wayne Tinkle's tenure. Games away from Gill Coliseum have been a problem and a struggle. But I would just say that, that was a very encouraging win and a testament to the way that they play. I also know that the people I know up in Spokane are in full-on panic mode about this Gonzaga team and what its fate might be come March.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct that people are freaking out, which everybody freaked out last year too. So, and everything worked out and they got to the Sweet 16. So, we shall see what happens. The season is young. What is funny is that they are coming to Portland this weekend though. So, so they're going to be back in town. But yeah, I mean, good for the Beavs. I'm sorry, my arrogant Gonzaga alum showed. And my apologies. Hand up. That's all me. Good lesson for yours truly. Don't underestimate people. So there you go. Hey, but I'll say another thing. That game once again made me really excited for the new Pac-8.
It's going to be a great basketball conference and probably a pretty decent football conference as well. But like from a basketball standpoint, I do love the idea that Oregon State and Gonzaga will be doing this twice a year now into perpetuity, at least as long as this version of this conference exists. But when you look at, what that team is going or what that conference is going to look like and the number of teams that have made, deep tournament runs in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Utah State basketball school, San Diego State basketball school, Fresno State has been a basketball
school right now,
but has been a basketball school.
Yes.
Oregon State, Gonzaga, Washington State has been in the tournament the last couple of years. So it's Boise
State. Yeah.
And so there's a lot to be excited about with that conference.
Yeah. And also I just would like to say I'm very excited to see Gonzaga and Wazoo play twice a year again.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
There are reasons why that rivalry was not going on the last 10ish years. And that is mostly because Wazoo was not good at basketball. But and I know that now I'm gonna get Wazoo fans coming after me. Jesus. They're very passionate about that rivalry, whereas, yeah, that's their thing. But yeah, I'm really excited to see that return, and not return once a year, but return twice a year. I think it's gonna be great. So the moral of the story is, yay Pac-8. We're excited for what's next.
Speaking of what's next, and this is the primary thing I wanted to talk to you about today. The Portland Trailblazers recently crested the halfway point of their season. And we all know the Blazers aren't very good. They're not supposed to be very good. They are, through 43 games, the Blazers are 15-28. They are very much on pace to hit the over in terms of win-loss that Vegas had. I think that was in the low 20s. I want to say it was 21.5 rather than look it up here. Let me just take a random stab in the dark. But I feel like 21.5 is the number that comes to mind. I'm wondering what, through these 43 games, what do you like? What don't you like? And what do you want to see in the final half of the season from ye old Portland Trailblazers?
Ye old Portland Trailblazers, ironically, who are a very young team. Man. I mean, I wasn't upset about a win over Miami after what transpired a few years ago, as somebody who, and now, of course, once again, I'm going to get yelled at by Miami fans. Can't wait. I had a snippet from this podcast a few years ago get aggregated on Miami Heat Twitter, and boy, did I have a few days. It was one of those times where you go on Twitter, you literally scroll up to the top of your notifications, and you get out of Twitter. You're like, okay, there's 20. Let me clear these. Bye. Probably wasn't. I wasn't perfect. I would never call myself that. But anyway, so I think just like everything right now feels very mid. Very like mid in terms of just like how they are, but also very like middling. It's just kind of like the Blazers are there. They're doing some things. We all know what's going to come. So I guess enjoy the things that are happening right now. Obviously I would love to see them start doing some big trades. Start kind of building what the future looks like. Unfortunately, the new CBA makes that extremely difficult right now.
Well, especially when people don't like your players.
Yes.
When your players aren't that appealing.
Yes. Yes, exactly. There's not really like anybody on the Blazers right now that like everyone's clamoring for. So that is a problem too. You are correct. And so yeah, I would like to see starting making steps towards really forming what the core of this next iteration of this team is going to be. But I also understand the difficulty of that right now. We talked about Scoot a little bit on the podcast last week. Happy to see him doing his, it has continued. So that is exciting to take in. That, there's obviously ups and downs, but at least we're in an up, which is, we got to celebrate the ups right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of downs as is, and there are way more downs coming. So, I mean, when you say like, what would I like to see the second half of the season? I think just what we're going to see the second half of the season is what it is. Like, we're going to be seeing a team that is not going to be winning. So I don't know if it's even like something that I've thought about what I would like to see the second half of the season, because I know what the reality is. And it's just kind of like, okay, that's that. I mean, even against Miami, I'm sitting here, I'm hunky dory. I'm on the phone with a friend, and I look up and I'm like, wait, Miami got back in this game? What? I literally said that on the phone. I was like, what? What? So, that's just what we're dealing with here.
It's so funny, that Miami game, because I was emceeing my son's Cub Scout troop's Pinewood Derby that night, and I watched the beginning of that game, and then we were at the Pinewood Derby, and I was on the mic, which is always a mistake, but I was introducing the heats for the races, and I was like, oh, this is the second heat, the 7th heat, the 23rd heat. And at one point I said, speaking of heat, does anyone here know how the Blazers did tonight in Miami? I'm in a room of like 150 Portland residents. No one responded. I was like, are you guys watching the Blazers ever? Like, I feel like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, would be somebody in the room who would respond and say, they won. I just thought it was like kind of an interesting cultural moment in the city of Portland that I got absolutely no response to that question.
I mean, that's reality. When your team becomes irrelevant in the NBA landscape, people are going to protect their mental, and just say, okay, I'm going to tap out for a little bit.
So, things that I have liked from the Blazers.
Please.
They play hard.
Yes.
I do think Chauncey Billups, despite being an underdeveloped head coach, maybe not really a head coach in the NBA, has connected with the young guys in a way where they play hard. Like, I'm seeing them make the extra pass. Like, I think they're playing hard and well for him, especially the young guys. I think you have to take the positive out of Scoot's recent stretch, where he has played well with more opportunity with the starters. 10 games is a relatively small sample size, but right now it constitutes about 10% of his NBA career. So if, the last 10% of his NBA career has been like pretty encouraging, you don't want to ignore that. Mm-hmm. So I don't put a ton of stock in it because NBA players can get hot. Like his 8 of 10 night, I think is a total anomaly. I still have a lot of questions about Scoot. A lot. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the ship has pretty much sailed on him living up to the initial expectations. The idea of him being like a star, a franchise player. Maybe even on him being like a starter on a good team. But like, he still is a professional NBA player, and so like his development matters. But I just find him to be like kind of a really interesting test of kind of where this team is. But to your point about like trades, I'm fascinated to see what the Blazers are able to do at the trade deadline, because the players that you would most want to trade are not the players that other teams would want. DeAndre Ayton, no. Jeremy Grant, maybe, but the contract is a huge deterrent. Matisse Thybulle, not healthy. Robert Williams, my understanding is like where the Blazers are in Robert Williams and where the league is, like the Blazers are going to trade Robert Williams. I will come on this podcast and issue whatever mea culpa you want if the Blazers don't trade Robert Williams, simply because it's a necessity, in my opinion. But where the Blazers are is they want a first round pick, and I've been talking to a lot of people the last couple of weeks about a variety of things with the Blazers. Nobody thinks they're going to get a first round pick for Robert Williams. So then the question is, do the Blazers accept that at the deadline and say, we're going to get whatever we can out of this, which is probably what they should do? Or do they say we're going to take this into the summer where we think there's more value and kind of take our chances? But if you do that, but doing that and continuing to try to maximize trade value is straddling the, are you rebuilding or are you not? Because if you're rebuilding, you should be all in on getting assets, and doing it slowly and waiting another cycle, because it feels like the Blazers have always been kicking the can down to the next cycle, the next trade deadline, the next offseason. Well, the young guys, the clock is ticking on them, and on their contracts and when you have to pay them, and like so they are stuck in kind of this situation longer too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fully in support of the Blazers getting rid of any and all of the veteran high dollar players that they can. I just am really skeptical that they're going to be able to get rid of anybody outside of Robert Williams. And because if I'm an NBA GM, I want Toumani Camara. Like, I don't think the Blazers are including him in anything.
No,
that'd be a shock. And then I want Denny Advia. And if I'm the Blazers, I just traded 2 first-round picks to get Denny Advia. Now, part of the reason they traded for him was because they know he has a lot of value around the league, and a winning team would probably overpay to get him. Like, he'd be really good on a lot of teams. Like, picture him on the Golden State Warriors right now. Yeah. Picture him on the Lakers. Picture him on the Mavs. Like, there's a lot of teams that could just drop him in and he'd be terrific. And so I think there is a market for Denny Advia, and it'd be really interesting if the Blazers traded him. But the question would be, are you getting more than you traded for him? Because you traded 2 firsts, including the pick that became Bub Carrington, and people love Bub Carrington in Washington. Like, he's been great, and he is going to be great. And the funny thing about that is, like, the Blazers didn't value the draft really that highly after 7. Like, they were like, we got Donovan Clingan, we're good. We don't you're talking to people there, like, they thought it was a weak draft. I mean, the perception of this draft was it was a weak draft. Well, Bub Carrington's good. He went 13. Dalton Connect has been good for the Lakers. He went 17. So it's like there were still talented players. And I'm not saying that the Blazers shouldn't have done the Denny Advia deal, but they really I think they did undervalue the rest of the first round in the draft last year. So anyway, you trade those picks for Denny Advia. Are you getting 2 firsts and a player for Denny Advia if you were to move him? Like, again, I don't think they're going to trade him this early because I think he does kind of fit what you're trying to do like a year from now. But if you aren't going to get there, trading him does become more viable. But does somebody come in and blow you away with a deal right now? I mean, you wouldn't hesitate to trade him because you're not where you want to be, where he's actually helping you yet. If anything, Denny Advia is hurting you by being so good. So I'm fascinated by where they are and what they're going to be able to do or what their options are, because of the guys they want to trade, the only one they really are going to have a market for, I think, is Robert Williams. And of the guys they don't want to trade, there probably is a market for Denny Advia, but they literally just set the market on him less than a year ago. So going to be fascinating to see what happens. And then to your point about, losing and tanking, they've kind of shown their hand the last few years with shutting guys down after the All-Star break and going on these epic losing streaks after the All-Star break. And it's so overt. Well, they put themselves in a position where that's a necessity because they've won 15 games right now. They've won too many games. And I know that, like, people don't want to hear that and, like, losing sucks, but they have won so many games now that I don't know that they can get back into this lottery race from a probability standpoint. Because the teams that are worse than them right now that have fewer wins are Washington, Utah, Toronto, New Orleans, Charlotte, and Brooklyn. None of those teams are going to get better. No. None of those teams are going to be trying to win games. So now you're trying to out-lose teams that have been losing from the beginning. And this is the problem when you, like, are just good enough. You're just good enough to, like, screw around and win some games. And that's why, like, the Blazers, like, get killed for, like, the Advia trade, because, like, he's a good player, but he's not good enough to, like, make you to change the course of your team. Like, your team is still a lottery team. You're still one of the worst teams in the league, but you're not as bad as you were without him. It's like, how do you get, like, so now you're trying to rebuild through the draft. That's your entire strategy in a draft where everyone agrees that there is a clear-cut top 3. You aren't giving yourself the best chance mathematically of getting into the top 3. And yes, I understand that the last several years, the top 2 teams in the lottery odds haven't, or the teams with the worst 2 records haven't won the lottery. Like, and that it is a crapshoot and that you can do all this tanking and it doesn't pay off. I get that. But when this is your strategy, you have to give yourself the best chance. And the Blazers haven't done that. So somebody has to be accountable for that. And like, again, I understand nobody likes losing, but that is your path right now. So, I mean, you could, like, there was a great quote from Victor Wembanyama in the New York Times where he was talking about like becoming the face of the NBA and like kind of his greatness, or like people around him were talking about his greatness and him being the face of the NBA. It's very charming. Victor Wembanyama, it turns out, is a very charming and insightful individual. People should go read that story. But like the last line of the story is a quote from him saying, "I fail at failing." And the Blazers are currently failing at failing. They need to fail harder. Like hashtag fail harder. And so instead of getting just kind of a wire to wire, like, you know, losing season, I mean, it's a losing season, but like a wire to wire, you know, worst team, they're going to try to be the worst team down the stretch. And it's like, it might be too late. So, you know, and by the way, what I want to see the second half of the season, no more DeAndre Ayton. I don't care about 22 and 15 against Miami. I said this at the beginning of the year, and I stand by it. DeAndre Ayton is not an asset for this team. He's not helping them in any way. All he can potentially do is capture lightning in a bottle once every 3 or 4 games and get a nice double-double that looks good on a score sheet and accidentally helps the Blazers win a game they have no business winning. He is not a winning player. He does not play defense. He does not play hard 75% of the time. Channing Frye, who I think has some credibility around here as a former Trailblazer, well-liked in the NBA community, continues to live in Portland. On his own podcast last week, absolutely went off on DeAndre Ayton and his effort and the way that DeAndre Ayton will be standing there and watch a rebound just float over his head. It's the stuff we've been watching for 2 years. DeAndre Ayton is not part of the Blazers' future, and he does not help them get where they're trying to go in the present. So it would be a great time for DeAndre Ayton to have a season-ending hangnail. That's what I want to see in the second half of the season.
No mo DA. That's what Brian wants.
But I would also just say, it's like, when you're talking about like how the Blazers got here, you know, some of this is, you know, what they have to do, right? You have to lose to build through the draft. But some of this is of their own making.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Why did you sign Jeremy Grant to a 5-year contract? Why did you do the DeAndre Ayton deal at all? Like, I understand you like there's upside there and maybe a change of scenery will help him. Yeah, but that's like kind of a big if. And if the answer is no, you've got him for 3 years at, you know, $100 million. And lo and behold, the answer's been no. You know, Matisse Thybulle, like, why did you match that offer sheet with Dallas? Because, like, again, those are the sorts of things you do if you're trying to win. And the Blazers, for all intents and purposes, should not have been trying to win. So it's like you're either all in on rebuilding through the draft or you aren't. And like that's, and they've just been like kind of this.
They're 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
They've been medium all on everything.
They've been mid.
They're mid. And it's so there are a few things happening on the court this year that I've enjoyed. Watching Denny Advia play basketball makes me happy. It does. Like, I love that you've got a 6'9" forward who will grab the rebound and go and can distribute, can hit threes, will attack the rim. He plays hard. If there was a fist fight on the court, Denny Advia is the guy who's running in. I love that. I have really enjoyed Toumani Camara's continued ascent. I have appreciated Shaedon Sharp's game. Still not sure where he's going in his career, but like he can be very fun to watch. But man, there's just not a lot else there right now. Yeah. You know, Donovan Klingen's been hurt. Robert Williams hasn't been playing. Scoot Henderson's up and down. I've enjoyed the last 10 games. But it's a very frustrating time to observe the Portland Trailblazers. Yeah.
I certainly get your point about Jeremy Grant. I definitely, you know, because, you know, here's what would be my assessment of what happened there. That was such a chaotic time because that was when they re-signed him was within a week of Dame requesting a trade. And I just think unfortunately, people were just, I think, I think maybe the Blazers wanted a good headline during that time.
And they didn't get it. It was the 93rd paragraph of every, and because they signed Jeremy Grant, they gave him that contract. They came to terms on that contract on the Friday. I think it was the Friday night, but it was June 30th. And Dame asked out on the morning of, was it the morning of July 1st? It was whatever it was. Jeremy signs the night before.
Resonates with me, ish.
It was the night before Dame asked out that Jeremy signed, but he didn't sign, right? But like, if I'm the Blazers, I'm not making a decision on Jeremy Grant and what he's gonna and what we're gonna do with him until I know what Dame's gonna do. And I understand that means, oh, Jeremy could go elsewhere. Nobody else was giving him 5 years, and nobody else had the money to give him the money he got. Like, what was available to him in free agency wasn't going to be what was available to him in Portland. So it would have behooved Jeremy to wait out Dame and the Blazers anyway, certainly for another 24 hours. So that was I think, a panic move by the Blazers. And you can't make panic moves that cost you $160 million in cap space. I don't care about the actual money, like in cap space, and like and ties up your books for 5 years.
Yep. Yeah, no, I definitely think it was
a rash decision.
Trying to, I mean, everybody knows that Dame and Jeremy got along really well. I'm sure that was like hey, we're trying to appease Dame by re-signing Jeremy, And now it's become exceedingly clear that it was not the right decision, especially in terms of the fact that they have yet to be able to trade him for the value that they think he has.
Well, and I think they're at a point with him and with DeAndre Ayton and with Anthony Simons. You're going to have to include assets to get off of these contracts. And the Blazers should absolutely not be trading assets when they're in a rebuild. So they're just going to wait these guys out? Mm-hmm. Maybe. I mean, that kind of seems like the right thing to. It's certainly DeAndre Ayton. It's a year and a half. You can wait that out. Matisse Thybulle, year and a half at $13 million. You can figure that out. But Robert, like Anthony Simons, like maybe you end up having to move him in the summer or a year from now. But like, again, trading him in the summer or a year from now only, one, delays his opportunity to grow somewhere else and delays the opportunity for the guys who are coming up behind him. So it just, again, mucks up your ability to kind of get yourself pointed in the right direction. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to do a trade deadline show on this podcast. Like, I feel like we have probably addressed this pretty well until there's actually something that happens. Trade deadline's coming up in 2 weeks. You know what? I resolve not to talk trade deadline until after it has happened and we know what is coming or what they've done, because I think we understand the stakes and the parameters here. And I frankly find it exhausting because they are locked in a position that is mostly of their own doing. And it's so hard because of decisions they've made.
Insane.
All right, Brenna. Well, that's going to be our show for today. Blazers are obviously coming back from their road trip over the weekend. Damian Lillard returns to Portland next week, which is of note, but certainly not the spectacle that it was a year ago.
I'm so glad I won't be that spectacle. Oh my God. I felt for Dame last year. I really did. Because he was just a pony in a circus last year.
Yeah, a lot of emotions. And a lot of people poking, prodding.
So many press conferences. So many obligations. He's home with his kids one time, and I'm sure he barely got to see them.
Yeah.
It was just, I understand everything that went down. I understand why everything happened the way it did. And I mean, I appreciated the pregame press conference. That was different.
Very helpful.
Very helpful. However, man, I'm happy for him that, and then of course, then he comes to Portland and it's on a back-to-back, so he doesn't even get to hang out with his kids. Great. Yeah. So I feel bad for him in terms of that again. So, But yeah, I think that will be a much calmer situation this year, and I'm good with it. I'm good with it.
So that's a big headline for next week, but we will be back to break that down, I suppose, and anything else going on in the world of sports here in the state of Oregon. For Brenna Green, Bill Oram, thank you for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast.